All right, so it's Johnny the Coach here, and I'm coming at you during the first week of the National Football League season in the U.S. and the last month of the Major League Baseball season in the U.S. And those are significant because of the topic I'm going to speak about today. What I really want to talk about today is there are basically three approaches to life that I've witnessed and observed. And these three are evidenced by how people play fantasy sports. Now, the thing is that the Major League Baseball was the national pastime in the U.S. back when I was growing up. So it is what I know best. I got very good at it because we all played it. Football, mom didn't want me getting hurt, so she didn't really let me get into it as much. And it wasn't, frankly, as popular. Baseball ran from April to October. Football, it was winter. I was in the north, so it was a pretty cold time. And that would run from basically September to December, January at that time. Now, the thing about this is that there was something that happened in the 80s that was key to all this, and that was called the internet. Fantasy sports started becoming popular. I remember in the early 80s, one of my friends had a fantasy football team. I didn't know a lot about football at the time. Well, I was starting to get to know more about football at the time. But he asked me if I wanted to help him out and team up. And I said, sure, why not? So, being the statistician that I can be, I jumped into this stuff. And during the draft, I, I insisted on a kind of a late draft pick. Guy's name was Todd Christensen. He was a tight end for the then Oakland Raiders. And he ended up being one of the top scorers of all season. My friend asked, how the heck did you know that this guy was going to be so good? Because he helped us win our league, basically. And I just said, I was looking at the stats. I look at what what type of quarterback they have, what kind of running game, all the different aspects of the game, and then look at what a player would benefit most from that scenario. Well, it's the same thing about life, and I'm going to talk a bit about fantasy baseball as well because that's the one I still get into fantasy baseball. I only intended to jump in and create one team this year just to keep my foot in the game, and accidentally wound up setting up three. So it's funny though because those three all have a lot of consistency to them. They have similar players on each of them, and there's a reason for that. So I'm going to get into the three approaches to life, starting with the first, which is the person who basically just goes along, doesn't have any major goals, is very happy with their life day to day. They have a nice family or friends or other acquaintances that they enjoy spending time with, but they're never really like, you don't think of them as somebody that's trying to do something exceptional. Maybe they are, but you don't think of them that way because they don't never really let you know that that's a part of them. I do think every one of us has something that we're goals and things we want in our lives, but this person is basically happy to be here, enjoying being here, and that's fantastic because if that's who you are, enjoy it. Recognize it and be true to who you are. That's what's important to me. Don't need to be the president. In fact, nowadays you probably don't want to be the president. Anyway, the second type of person is basically the type of person that does have these big ideas and they start along the path of looking to make these become a reality. They really take the action to try to get somewhere with this stuff, and they run into difficulties. Maybe one thing here, one thing there, and everything becomes kind of difficult. And basically, they give up. They decide that this is just too much. I'm not going to be able to do it. And then they step back into basically the lifestyle of the first type of person. But they're not really right for that because they do have something in mind. Um, So it's a little bit. This is probably the most challenging scenario because there is something in this person's heart, and they're having a hard time getting to it. And it's really a matter of deciding whether they're going to be able to take the steps to actually have it happen. The third type, this type is really interesting because they do their homework, they have their goals, and they don't stop for any difficulty until they reach their goals. Not easy to do, so it's probably not a really high percentage of people in the world, but it's a really important thing to know because if that's who you are, that's who you need to be. There's a word that one of my bosses, when I was young, I asked him to do a reference for me for a scholarship application, and he used the word mettle, mettle. I'd never heard that word before, so I looked it up, and it was really interesting because it really applies to this third category. Mettle means you work and work and work until you get to where you want to be, basically. So this is a third type of person that I see in the world, and each one of these is evidenced if you look at fantasy sports. I'm going to refer to my fantasy baseball teams with this, but basically, the first category that we talked about, which is happy to be here and enjoying life, right? That is the fantasy sports owner who enters a league, may draft a team, may actually let it auto draft, so they never do anything having to do with their team, but they just let the team sit all season, and they may not even look at the results from their team. And but they're just happy to have a team to be able to say, hey, I've got Juan Soto on my team, or I've got Bryce Harper, Colson Montgomery. That's a new name coming in this year, right? Anyway, that's the first type of person, and that's basically the type of person that takes this approach in fantasy sports. Now, the second type is really interesting because they jump in, they draft a team more. I mean, very seldom will they auto draft. They're going to draft their team because they really want to win. But they run into situations where they maybe didn't do their homework and understand how the league is set up to begin with. And I'm going to go into that more in the third category. But more so, maybe they have several players that go on the injured list or a couple that aren't performing to expectations from prior seasons. They might try to replace some of these, drop a player, add a new one, replace them, find something that works better. But after a little while, once they've done that for a while and they're not seeing huge results, they give up. You see those teams continually put up rosters that have injured players on them, and they don't replace them even with players on their roster that could go into that slot. So you can tell they're not even looking at it anymore. They've given up. So their dream of winning, they've let it go because they just find it to be too hard. Now, the third category is also very interesting. And all right, I'll say, I'm big into stats and I'm big into sports, so I tend to be in this third category. I want to win and I'm going to do what I need to do, right? But it starts at the beginning. It starts before the draft even starts because you need to look at, and I have found that these rules change from year to year. I look at how the point distribution runs, what statistics are given what point value, so that I know what is going to give me the most bang for my buck, basically. Generally, in the past, I remember ERA, earned run average, was always huge. Strikeouts and wins and saves. Those four were the biggies. There were a couple of others that were considered, but they weren't as important. Well, this season, I look at this stuff before the draft, and I see wins, saves, and strikeouts are the most important things. They don't even look at earned run average, which is very strange to me because I think the ERA is extremely important. But they do look at walks, they look at hits, they look at runs, things that are given up by the pitcher. But those are not penalized nearly as much as these other categories are rewarded. So I was looking at pitchers that got a lot of strikeouts and were on teams that were likely to win, so they got wins. And I also found that relievers, the closers, were not as important because they don't tend to pitch as much. So when they do pitch, they only tend to pitch one inning. So they're limited as to the number of strikeouts they can get, but they can get that save, which is a big number. So you need to have a very successful closer as a reliever. Otherwise, it's almost ridiculous to keep a reliever on your team. Occasionally, there's one that might pitch a couple innings at a time and gets a high amount of strikeouts. That can be good. But again, see, I'm getting into all these stats because I get into it. And on the hitting side, this season, again, no batting average, which is very strange to me because batting average to me is probably one of the keys. However, in recent years, batting averages aren't as high as they used to be. So that may be part of the reason that they're not being considered so much anymore. But what I do find, home runs, of course, the most important thing. And the second would be triples, and the third would be doubles. It's all about multiple bases on your hits. Singles, of course, get some points. Walks get similar to singles. But most of it, even steals get a good amount of points compared to base hits or walks. But the most important, home runs. So you know Kyle Schwarber is right at the top of my list, as well as a few other big hitters, Aaron Judge. So I put the things that rewarded you most at the top of my list. So I chose players who were likely to get those statistics. Now, so that's even before the season starts, and it doesn't have to be long before it. I didn't spend a lot of time looking at this because all you have to do is look at it and you see what what points are rewarded or what statistics are rewarded the best. So it was pretty quick and easy. And then once we got into the draft, I was able to look at categories players, so I knew where I was looking for them. Now we went through the draft. I wasn't so. The two teams that I accidentally set up started auto drafting, and I wasn't thrilled with what it was doing. So I jumped in and I started drafting for myself, and I started to improve the quality of the team. And I did find that I had to go back in and make some adjustments on those teams during the season to let some players go who they're good players, but they're just not getting the home runs or the strikeouts and wins, whatever it might be that I was looking for. So I made a few little adjustments, but each one of my teams was set up well from the beginning. And then when injuries occurred, I was able to find other players to replace them, going by the player with the hot hand at the time until that other player was back from the injured list. So, you can tell just by what I was just saying now that I'm committed to this stuff. I want to win, and I am going to make the changes I need to make in order to put my team in a position to have the best chance to win. Now, the interesting thing is, you don't have to start strong if you're the type of person that is going to that has mettle, M-E-T-T-L-E once again, and is committed to what they're doing. Because I'm going to use an example. There was a team in one of my leagues that was actually in 8th place with like 3 weeks left to the season. And I saw all these changes going on the roster. They were going to the hot players, to the younger players that were being brought up for the minor leagues that were expected to pitch well or hit well. They made these changes, and suddenly they started really scoring very highly. So they were doing the work. They were doing their research. They were doing the work to make the changes they needed to make to improve their team, so they started winning. This team, in the last week of the season, won their last week, and the two teams above them lost. So they went from 7th, because they had already stepped up to 7th. They went from 7th up to 5th, 8th to 6th, the top 6 teams in the league. go to playoffs. Now, what happens in playoffs? Anything goes. If your team's solid at going into playoffs, it doesn't matter if you're sixth place and you have to play an extra week. Not a big deal. You can win that league from sixth place. So that franchise owner did an amazing job of improving their team over several weeks to get into the position to have a chance to win the league. So that player was committed, or that franchise owner was committed to winning. That's the difference between that owner and the other two that he passed, because the other two that he passed didn't do anything. All they needed to do was, one of them just needed to put one of their players in for one of their injured players. They would have probably won that week and been in playoffs. They didn't do it. So that just told me they had left, they had quit, they were done. It was too much work for them. So basically what I'm saying is three types of people. The type of person that enjoys life, goes along, doesn't have any major accomplishments in mind. The second one is the one that has major accomplishments, runs into challenges, doesn't have the wherewithal and the chutzpah to make it through. And the third is the one, win at all costs, do what they need to do to win their league. That's basically the way it is in life as well. So enjoy the football season, all 16 weeks, and the rest of the baseball season, which has more than 16 games to go with 1 month to go. Yes, baseball players 10 times the number of games that the NFL plays during its regular season. Anyway, this is Johnny the Coach, and I'm signing off. Take care.